Templar. This group of noblemen vowed to protect pilgrims in the years following the First Crusade. This purpose placed the new organization within a rich context of religiously inspired traveling. St. Cletus, Bishop of Rome and the third pope, and this goes way back to the 2nd century, is credited with the concept that visiting the relics of St. Peter and St. Paul was more efficacious for salvation of one's soul than 2 years of fasting. So there was a link between religious sanctification and pilgrimage, and this is why pilgrimage was so important to a medieval Christian. It was about as important for them as it would be for a Muslim today of going to Mecca and Medina. So the importance of pilgrimage in early Christianity was very real, despite this practice never being required of every believer as it was in Islam. For these early and medieval Christians, the holy sites in Palestine were always the most important. The earliest such pilgrimage, of which we have reliable sources, as told by Eusebius, is that of Melito of Sardis, a bishop who visited Jerusalem and other sites in Palestine in 170 AD. Other early pilgrims include Clement of Alexandria, Origen, and Pionius. Most important was the journey to Jerusalem in the 320s by Helena, mother of Emperor Constantine. She sought important relics, and early Christian sources claim that she located the true cross, the exact one used for Jesus' crucifixion, and parts of this true cross. Byzantine rulers eventually built the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on the spot where the relic was found. Historic records about the creation of the Knights Templar are scarce, but the earliest accounts point to the 2nd decade of the 12th century, and the probable date is 1118 or 1120, in which 9 noble knights made a promise to serve God by protecting Christian pilgrims from thieves and bandits. They took vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience, in the manner of clerics who lived in a fraternal community with monks and were involved in public ministry, but didn't actually become monks. The knights were to abide by Augustinian rule, but instead of living a contemplative life in a monastery, they would bear arms and fight in defense of the Christian cause in Palestine. So, warrior monks. The spiritual head of the order was the Patriarch of Jerusalem, the highest religious authority of Catholics in the Crusader states. Knights wishing to join the order had to satisfy a rigorous list of requirements, ending with a secret initiation that's never been exposed. Initiates had to enter the order as an existing knight, donate all worldly possessions to the order, and take a vow of poverty and chastity, never having relations with women, and never to retreat in battle until all was lost. The order about not having relations with women was frequently violated. The order didn't flourish at first, but it did succeed in protecting pilgrims in the Holy Land. When they were ratified by the Pope in 1129, gifts of money, land, and resources poured in. We have legal wills that state that the Knights Templar were to inherit the property of European landholders, for example. The ranks of the Knights Templar grew in number and reputation as their financial resources grew, as nobles from all over Christendom joined the order. The knights were also able to quickly find favor from secular authorities. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem granted them partial use of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, located on the Temple Mount. Called the Temple of Solomon by the Crusaders, even though it was an 8th century Umayyad mosque and not the actual temple of the Israeli king, it served as a royal residence. Its central location made it a desirable place of real estate. The devout noblemen began to call themselves the Knights of the Temple of Solomon, or the Poor Knights of Christ. The volume of resources managed by the Knights Templar dictated the need for careful and detailed administration, and soon, non-military Templars outnumbered the crusading knights. These administrators created a complex and sophisticated economic infrastructure, expanded and innovated banking techniques, and built strongholds across Europe. In 1150, the Templars created a lending system, an early form of checking accounts, where individuals embarking on pilgrimages could lend their valuables to the Templars and travel to the Holy Land unencumbered. If you weren't traveling with so much wealth on you, then you wouldn't be easy pickings by bandits and highwaymen along the way, which frequently happened with pilgrims, why they were attacked so much. So in this way, you were less likely to be robbed or killed, and when a pilgrim reached his destination, he would receive an amount of Templar treasure equal to the initial investment. The financial network of the Templars spanned many nations, becoming an international entity. It's estimated that the Templars amassed 9,000 estates, managing farms, churches, and castles, and constructed two great temples in Paris and London. The Templar organization was a blueprint for an early multinational corporation. This international banking and military powerhouse didn't elude the attention of kings and the Pope in a Europe where the church and state were increasingly at odds as the High Middle Ages went on. The Pope saw the Templars as a personal religious military guard that existed outside the jurisdiction of any sovereign and was very attractive to him. In 1139, the Pope granted the Templars immunity from local laws. Templars could pass tax-free through all territories and were exempt from all authority except the Pope. They became very unpopular with local rulers, and rowdy Templars gained a very bad reputation. By 1274, King Philip of France was in debt due to his war with England. The king devised a plan to access the wealth of the Templars. His first step was to propose an end to the rivalry that had arisen between the Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitaller, another monastic crusading order founded on similar principles. Little came of this, however, and the king embarked on a propaganda campaign in order to do away with the Templars. His efforts took years of manipulation, combined with the declining popularity of the Crusades and the redundancy of that order, when there weren't any possessions in the Holy Land to protect anymore because the Crusades had failed. In 1307, the king declared Templars heretics and issued a secret order for their arrest. The Templars' air of secrecy made it easy to accuse them of anti-Christian initiation ceremonies and even dealings with the devil. The Templars were accused of spitting on the cross, denying Christ, idol worship, and other indiscretions. When they denied these charges, Templars were tortured to such an extent that they falsely confessed. A papal inquiry followed, and although many Templars recanted their confessions once freed from the torture chamber, Pope Clement V, under pressure from the powerful king, declared them relapsed heretics. Many Templars were found guilty and publicly burned at the stake in 1310. A papal bull issued by Clement V in 1312 dismantled the order. The Pope decreed that guilt-free Templars were free to join the Hospitallers or live out their lives with a generous pension. Scholars and historians continue to debate the truth behind the demise of the Knights Templar, but the fact remains they were a successful organization that provided protection to civilians and created a highly organized financial network. Legends abound about the order going underground and continuing to operate to this day. Their secret initiation ceremonies and cloister dedication created a larger-than-life image. After the trial of King Philip and the condemnation by Pope Clement, elderly Templar Grand Master Jacques de Molay, before being burned at the stake, demanded to face Notre Dame Cathedral with his hands tied in prayer, saying, "God knows who is wrong and has sinned. Soon a calamity will occur to those who have condemned us to death." Whether or not this is true, within a year, both the Pope and the King were dead. The real exploits of the Knights are recorded in historical accounts. In 1153, 40 Templars were killed in the siege of Ascalon, but here the once impenetrable city fell to the Crusaders. In 1177, 459 Templars led a battle against Saladin near Ramla under the Templar-held relic of the cross. In the thick of the battle was a teenage King Baldwin of Jerusalem, bandaged and ridden with leprosy, but still fought because he was moved by the Templars, despite his poor health. In 1191, after a year-long siege, the Templars defeated Saladin's army at Acre. That same year, the Templars aided England's crusading king Richard the Lionheart in another defeat. So to this day, many monasteries and other structures built by the Templars and financed by the Templars survive, including the professional offices of the barristers of England. And plenty of myths surround the secretive order. A. Grisham collected them in his book, Legend of the Knights Templar. He notes that in every region of the world where the flag of the poor Knights of Christ once flew above castles and houses, there are myths and curios about their ancient times. One such story uses the trope of the damsel in distress. As Grisham accounts, in 1227, a Templar preceptory was established on a piece of land donated by the Council of Toulouse and local barons in modern-day France. Here's how his story goes. The rural area near the town of Caylus was at one point devastated by a ruthless dragon. The creature continuously destroyed the peasants' crops and devoured their children. One day the dragon came across a young girl of beauty. Instead of devouring her, decided to keep her in his lair forever. A Knight Templar by the name of Lagardelle was passing through the region on his way back from the Holy Land. He was motivated by the peasants' pleadings and set off to slay the dragon. To improve the knight's chances against the monster, locals vowed to build a chapel in honor of the Virgin Mary, provided that Lagardelle was successful, and the Templar was able to slay the dragon and free the young girl. Well, the victorious knight could not marry anyone due to his Templar vows, and the people of Kalis kept their promise and built the chapel directly above the entrance to the dragon's cave. Their efforts were mysteriously thwarted, and all their building materials kept disappearing, only to show up at the bottom of the hill the next morning. This was found to have been done by angels who were conveying instructions from the Virgin Mary herself regarding the location of the new chapel. As a result, the location of the building was moved to where a 14th century church stands today. To commemorate the miraculous story of a Templar knight slaying a dragon for the sake of the young girl's deliverance, the chapel was dedicated as Notre Dame de Livron, Our Lady of Deliverance. The entire area eventually received a name pointing to its main attraction, the Chapel of Our Lady of Deliverance. And stories like that are littered across Europe in different churches and places where the Knights Templar once existed. In England, Scotland, Ireland, France, Spain, Portugal, Egypt, Israel, Italy, Germany, Poland, the Czech Republic, and all over the place. All right, well, that is all for today's episode on the Middle Ages. In the next episode, we're going to be digging into some of the worst episodes in medieval history. First, the Black Plague. We're also going to look at something that's often associated with the Middle Ages, but it's widely misunderstood. That is witch burnings. We're going to show that witch burnings definitely happened, but they weren't in the Middle Ages. They happened during the Reformation and the Renaissance. All right, well, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to check out this show. First of all, I'd like to thank the Indulgences Rangers, and especially our spy masters, Baron Fraser, Carl from Norway, Chris from Maine, Moondoggy from Ohio, and Rick Knowlton, and I'll explain what that means in a second. If you like this show, please like and subscribe on the podcast listener of your choice. Join our Facebook page as well. You can find it if you just search for History Unplugged. And one of the best ways you can help out the show is if you join the Knowlton's Rangers. The Knowlton's Rangers were an elite reconnaissance and espionage detachment of the Continental Army in the Revolutionary War, but it's also the name of the History Unplugged membership program. Learn how to join by going to patreon.com/unplugged. So here's what you get if you become one of the Knowlton's Rangers. If you join at the level of Scout, you can get early access to new podcast episodes, along with enjoying absolutely every single episode of the History Unplugged podcast ad-free. All 270 and counting episodes. If you join at the level of Intelligence Officer, you can also get access to premium episodes, like a multi-part series on the life of Audie Murphy, the most decorated combat soldier in World War II, or the 10-part series Ottoman Lives, a series that looks at the cast of characters that made up the Ottoman Empire, such as the Sultan, the Eunuch, the harem servant girl, and the soldier. And finally, if you join at the level of Spy Master, you get all the same stuff as the Scouts and Intelligence Officers, but you also get a shout-out to you and or your business at the end of each episode, a 3-pack of hardcover history books, plus you will be put at the very front of the line for me to answer your question about history, and I can guarantee I will dedicate an episode that's about an hour long or so to your question. Sign up at patreon.com/unplugged. Again, that's patreon.com/unplugged. Anyway, those are the ways you can help out the show. Thank you so much for your support. Thanks for listening to the History Unplugged podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get your daily dose of all things history related, from ancient Greece to the Cold War. We'll see you next time at the History Unplugged podcast.